And we're live to review an episode of Homicide: Life on the Street. The name of the episode is in the title. Over to Jeff.
So that's season 7, episode 10, which is called Shades of Grey, and it was written by David Simon, Julie Martin, and T.J. English, and directed by Adam Bernstein, and originally aired January 8th, 1999. And I'm going to read a brief recap of the episode and then turn it over to Ben for his thoughts, and then I'll chime in with a little bit after that. So, a white bus driver striking a black female pedestrian sparks a riot. The driver is killed, and some distance away from the riot, another body is found. Mike and Gardy look into the death of the driver, while Lewis and Shepard look into the death of the other body. Lewis finds a clue at the scene, a button later discovered to be missing from a police uniform. Gardy and Mike actively debate whether race was the motivation for the driver's beating death. Mike suspects the incident was not racially motivated. The bus riders are interviewed to find out what they know. Lewis and Shepard approach a house looking for their witness without backup. For her trouble, Shepard keeps a hold of her suspect but loses her gun and is severely beaten. Ballard is recalled from her hiking vacation. Lewis lays down the law for the residents of Little Jamaica. He wants Shepard's gun returned tonight. The witness Shepard caught identifies Officer Hellriegel as the murderer, and the men who beat the driver to death are also identified, and the gun is returned. So that's the gist of what happened. Ben, what do you say?
I thought it was a very good episode. It had a quick pace. This time it didn't go to Florida, they went to Russia. About that graphic. Right. I loved, first of all, the dialogue was very good. They had a Ralph Cramden line. Now, Jeff, was that the name of the character in The Honeymooners, Ralph Cramden?
Yeah.
Now, was that series short-lived? The Honeymooners. I know it became a classic, but was it short-lived?
I mean, I don't remember how long it lasted off the top of my head.
I think that was Jackie Gleason, wasn't it? Yeah.
It certainly wasn't short-lived in reruns. I know that.
Yes. So lots of good dialogue. Like, so for instance, when you had from the Black Witness, the old lady when she was saying that, playing that hippity hop nonsense, and then I like the good enough acting from the actress playing Shepard, where she was like, a lot of times in like British programs and for people who are not that good at acting, when they've just been beaten up in the face, they just talk normally, and they make the makeup look fake because of that. So that was, and then I got a little quote here from Lewis, and I thought it was good. Not just good character comedy, but also good for his type as well. And that's when he is outside of the room, where the hospital room where Shepard is in, and he's saying to Bayliss and to Munch, and he's talking about the gun. They took it away from her. They shot at me with it. Dunn killed my best Brim. No way, no how. Nobody's gonna beat my partner down like that. Take her weapon and use it to shoot up my lid. Throws his hat away. And then we had G's reaction, because G knows, probably more than the others, G knows how vengeful Lewis can be, from the Mahoney example. So any comments on what I've said there, Jeff?
Oh, yeah, are you finished, or?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. For some reason I figured you'd have more to say, but I said last week that there's a lot of really good elements in this episode, and it's let down just by one thing, really. And
Yep.
That's what keeps it from being like a 10 episode to me, is the parts with Shepard are really kind of far-fetched to me. That that she's in the position she's in the first place. And we had some talk back in the third season about some people implying that there were females in positions in the police department that didn't necessarily get there out of merit, that it was people trying to, kind of do an affirmative action type thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't have that mentioned with Shepard specifically, which is kind of interesting considering all the other talk in the episode about like racial relations and things. But honestly, what you have is is a lot of honest dialogue, including Lewis saying what he says about her physique and, basically implying that she's not really that tough. She may be tall, but, and so it kind of reminds you that, in a way, it's almost reminding the viewer that, this actress was, mainly hired for her looks. I'm not saying she's a bad actress, but I'm saying that, there was pressure from the network to try to have a better looking cast, which isn't necessarily a more realistic cast. And the writers may have dealt with that by saying, well, if you had a cop like this that actually was in a tough situation, what would happen to her? And that is what they figure might happen. But it just sort of re-emphasized that she seems kind of out of place. So that to me, like, and Lewis going into one club in the Jamaica thing and saying he wants the gun back, and then some magically.
Yeah, that was a bit.
So that's really the only thing that lets it down, because overall I thought it was really good. And one thing I took note of is, you talk about the dialogue, is how many people started sentences with "no offense" before they said something. So you had a lot of people saying stuff that they knew would offend somebody.
Yeah.
Starting with "no offense," in every direction, from between people of different races, between different people. There was that thing where people are like, they're saying what they really think because the crisis situation drives them to that, but they realize that people are often offended by people being blunt and honest about their assessments of things. So you had that too. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, there's overall, I really liked it. I think we've talked about it before, the Homicide does a really good job of presenting the perspective of different characters realistically, and not ever coming across like the show is trying to push any certain agenda. It's just telling the story and saying, here's what happens, here's how these characters react to it, and you can think what you want of it. And I really respect that method. And it's entertaining as well.
I think with if we'd have shown maybe other examples of, say, the female characters doing martial arts and things like that, then that might have helped with it. But did she not tell the guy to back off when the guy was approaching her? I mean, why did she?
I believe so, yeah.
I mean, because maybe that was the error of, in terms of the process, of like the officer telling the person to back off, and if they don't back off, they get shot. But there's been so many issues over that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is she hesitated in a way where the guy made an assessment really quickly that she's not really going to shoot him, so I can do what I want to do. I can overpower her. He made an instant assessment that just because she's got a gun and she's a cop doesn't mean that she's got the power here. So.
Yeah. And so is your main problem like them actually having that as part of the storyline and undermining things, and that you think the character should have been stronger? What would be your main fix for this episode then, Jeff?
I mean, fix? What do you mean?
Yeah, how would you fix it so that it got rid of that problem that irked you?
Well, that's a bigger question, because then it's like, am I in charge of the show, or am I just writing this one episode?
Ooh, in charge of the show.
Charge of the show, I don't have Shepard on there in the first place. She's a boring, useless character for the most part. But if I'm writing for the show and I'm saddled with her, then I find a way to, not have her as involved with things.
Right.
So, I mean, she's okay as somebody present making comments about things, but I wouldn't have her be a main part of the action.
Right.
Like for some random reason, they have Ballard's on vacation, which would make sense if it's like the actress isn't available or something. She's not in the episode, but then she randomly is in the episode halfway through it. So I don't know if they filmed it over different times and she was available for the second half of the episode or what, but that seemed a bit odd. But, I would just have Shepard be the one on vacation and have her, not really do anything, because Ballard didn't really do anything other than just ask what was going on.
Yeah. Hmm. Um. I. Oh, yeah, I mean, in terms of realism, they should be better in a physical confrontation. Even if someone is small of stature, they would be better in a physical confrontation. And because police forces actively do get taught, self-defense now and stuff by so I don't know what's about that. Yeah, I give it about 9 out of 10. So, what do you give it out of 10? I mean, I know you initially mentioned you would have given it a 10 if it wasn't for that element.
Well, that's the thing, is that, when someone's a police detective, like they implied at the beginning of the show that not only is, getting to be a detective a difficult thing to do, but getting homicide is like one of the most difficult of the detectives. And
Right.
so they've been called like they're like the elite of the police department, And so I know they did the thing later where they said people are going to be transferred around and stuff, but it still is like, if this woman she has spent, however many years as a uniform cop, at least 5, but probably more than that, because Bayless came in and he was probably like late 20s, and it was, they acted like he's this young baby-faced dude that just, is here because of favors called in or something, because he worked for the mayor, or, things like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they implied that there were special circumstances why he was in there as young as he was. And then since then, we've had characters that seem definitely younger than Bayless was. And, okay, maybe you could say there's like a youth movement where they're trying to bring in younger people, but at least they have enough experience as patrol cops, that it's believable that they could handle themselves in a situation on the street. And it just really isn't with her. She just seems out of place. Like, it's very different than Howard. Whereas Howard, you believe right from the start that she's a cop and has been for a while. She carries herself in every way that way. And even Ballard, though not as much that way and seeming to be naive about some things, you can understand that she's the type of character that has always been sort of the thinking cop, as Bayless said at the beginning, and sort of has had her sights set on detective right from the beginning, in terms of, maybe she didn't have to deal with quite as many on the street situations, but if she had to, she probably could. She seems like a little bit tougher, but anyway. But yeah, I feel like when things stretch the credibility, it's harder to enjoy it quite as much because, they're the things where you're like, if it weren't for this, then this would be like, really stellar. So I would have taken that stuff out and just had a little bit more of the, the stuff about the case with the bus driver and stuff. Maybe I would have stretched it to more than one episode because again, other work was like, well, we want more self-contained episodes where the cases are solved, and
Yeah.
but it seemed a little bit too easy in that score. But I did like the dialogue. I did like the discussions about the different issues involved. So all those things are really good. Because again, it's really just kind of honest perspective of those characters. And you even had, it brought up that Mike Little G has, even though he was from Baltimore, he's been out of there for a while, and that even just being gone for a little bit changed his perspective on what was going on. So I enjoyed that too.
Yeah, and I like the point of view from, in terms of an example of, you have Garty, overgeneralizer. And do you think that SJ's generalize a lot, Jeff?
Yes. Yeah, Morgan said, sounds like you're generalizing, but I mean, yeah, he is, but yes. and they're often big on categorizing things very quickly, one way or the other in some way. It's good or it's bad or it's, it's just these kind of snap judgments of things. And because I tend to think in sort of group mentality, it's like, I am or I'm not a member of a particular group, whatever the case may be. I have said that the main way he was able to quit smoking was that if he continued to smoke, then he was a smoker. And it sounds a little bit silly, but I know what he meant by that. It's like, it's about the group or category that he belonged to that he didn't want to be.
Yeah. He might also have been dating as well and thought it might improve his chances on the forms. Yeah, so I have this thing where I think that yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying that, so because I think that SJ is, I think that's an example of how they use extroverted intuition, where it's like this kind of generalizing, whereas like, and it's sort of like stick to these generalizations, whereas the NPs are sort of like coming up with new generalizations all the while, sort of like, picking up, more theories that they're taking out of fresh air, I suppose. Right. What else to say? This was an example, but so if it had been, say it was Ballard in that situation who got beaten up, would you still had the same problem with the episode? What happens if it was Ballard in that situation who got beaten up instead of Shepard?
I guess I'm missing something you're saying. I'm not getting the whole thing.
I was just saying that
I know you said something about if it was Ballard instead of Shepard.
Yeah. I mean, Lewis could have said the same point. Could have said something like, look how small she is. She's only 5'3". How is she expected to win in the fight? Something like that. So, and has
From what
Ballard,
we've seen
yeah.
of Ballard, though, I don't think she would have hesitated the same way.
Right.
You know, if she had the gun on the guy and told him to back off, and he kept coming to her, I think she would have shot him.
Right.
You know, whatever you could say about the physical stature of Ballard, I don't think mentally she would have hesitated the way that Shepard did. That's my opinion. Obviously, you know, they're fictional characters, and again, I don't know in that position, you know, exactly what would happen, but that seems like that it wouldn't have occurred the same way. And I think somebody could have jumped her from behind, obviously, but I don't think that exact scenario would have played out the same way.
So maybe a quick change they could have made is like if there was somebody else and jumped her from behind, that would have helped to like get rid of the plot hole.
Well, I don't even see it as a plot hole, really. I mean, I said it was realistic that happened.
Right.
To her. Yeah, I think it's not realistic that she's a homicide detective.
Right.
That's the problem, which is
not
not the fault of the writers writing this episode, because they're not the ones who put her in this situation. They just they used the character. In this, you know, wrote this story. Yeah. So, I said, you know, when you have a story, it's, you know, credited to 3 writers, plus you know that there's contributions from other people. So I don't know who wrote that specific scene, or how much of that was dictated by the producer or anything, because as we know in TV, the producers are in charge, really, when it comes to the overall stuff, the way the series goes. You can have an episode written and basically completely rewritten.
Yeah.
Because they say this is not what needs to happen. So you never really know how much is the writers and how much is somebody else. But
yeah, and there's I've heard things that there's lots of like Writers Guild rules about that, because it's like they don't want their members losing their fee for the episode by having a story editor like just changing a little bit and then like claiming the episode for themselves and like getting more money. So it like has to be quite big changes in order for the story editor to get a credit. So quite often when it's like a combo deal on the writing, it's signs of a lot of changes.
That's when you really know that a particular writer felt strongly about their story being changed, because the writer has to take the initiative, take their own name off it, which some have done, and because they didn't want that to be going out as saying this was what I wrote when that's not what I wrote.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen that often, because most of the time it's just you're part of a writing staff, and you know, generally you don't always see, like what Homicide did. In some episodes they just say written by, other ones have written by but also teleplay. So they're basically saying, like, when they say written by, these are the people that came up with the story, but the teleplay writer is the one that, you know, did the, I guess you could say, the final draft in terms of the way that it was written. Yeah. But that doesn't mean there weren't contributions as far as lines from anybody else. So it's hard to know exactly. But
yeah, each show has like their own different process of how they come up with an episode. For example, on Star Trek, they would have like sort of sessions where they would come out with beats, where they work out the story beats for a whole episode, and then they assign it to somebody to then write the episode, write the teleplay from those beats. Mm-hmm. But each show has its own philosophy, and I think on Seinfeld it was more each writer or pair of writers is like more responsible for that episode. So it was like less of a team effort, and they wanted more of the individuality of the writers to come through. So, for instance, Larry Charles would write good episodes of Seinfeld.
Yeah, from the commentaries on Simpsons, I learned that it depended on which writers, because there were some, like the guy who wrote the most Simpsons scripts ever, John Swartzwelder, he basically would go off by himself and write the entire thing himself, and then bring it to, you know, what they called the showrunner, who would basically, you know, make a few changes, but would generally keep his scripts fairly intact. Where there were other writers that wanted, you know, pretty much a bunch of input while they were writing it from other people. So they would write it in a room with, you know, a group of writers would just kind of throw out ideas for things. So it depended on which writer was the one that was tasked with writing that episode and what the process would be.
Also, what we hear in England is part of the myth of what they do in the United States, and some do this more than others. And I heard the example of, like, say, Cheers, where there would be a room where you would have like a whole, and it was like there's a much higher gag ratio. It's like the need to have 8 gags a minute. And maybe at the final session, the final rewrite, is you've got other writers pitching in lines to add to it, but then you get the problem of where you see those sitcoms where it's like everyone's too much of a one-liner machine, and it loses its characterization.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, if I was doing a show that had an audience that you could hear, I'd almost want to write it so it's not like every line is supposed to be stop, wait for laughter, because it kind of breaks up the momentum of things. It sounds goofy that way,
Oh, I don't know if you watched 2.5 Men. Did you watch 2.5 Men?
Not on purpose.
But I watched a few of those episodes. But I didn't like Charlie Sheen. It was a little bit crossed that threshold of then, and then a little bit too much in his personal life. But one of the interesting things I heard about how they shot the episode was that they would record it. If there wasn't enough laughs, they would stop it, rewrite it, and re-record it again. Say if a scene wasn't particularly funny enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what else to say about this episode. I thought it was quite good in the... Okay, another angle we could take is... I think... I've never seen an episode... I can't remember an episode of Homicide that I've watched where I've objected to the way they've handled race. I've never said anything... I can't remember saying anything like all blatant liberal bias or anything like that. I think they've always handled it well. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't get the feeling ever from them that they were trying to push any particular agenda. They were just trying to tell the story as honestly as possible, and I thought they did a pretty good job of it. I liked the callback thing. That's, when they have characters that show up again, like we had this cop involved in the story 5 years ago, where he's not the one who actually shot the guy, but he was on the scene. So in a way, it's almost like they're kind of, again, it's not an agenda, it's just sort of a reminder. There's a theme there where it's kind of like, he may have looked at it as, his boss or whatever, the lieutenant, that got busted for shooting the other dude, he might have looked at it from a revenge angle in some way. He might have wanted to, think, he might have had bitterness about it. Or he may just never have thought that anything was wrong about what he did, and just he's always carried that perspective. So, or it may have been completely unrelated. That's the thing, is that they leave you to decide that. It's not pounded into your head like, oh, this is definitely what everyone was thinking in these situations.
I liked, early on in the episode, G's ESTJ moment that he's angry about there being a riot in his city.
Yeah.
And also, part of him, I suppose, is thinking, like, we've got these people destroying their own community. And what are they achieving by just bashing up their own community? And
yeah, that was another one of those no offense lines when the daughter of the bus driver tells Mike, no offense, but what do you want him to feel like when his neighborhood turned to garbage?
Yeah, that was a tough line. Calling it garbage.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like, from her perspective, she's like, well, he grew up in this place. He was there first, and then other people came in, and the crime rate goes up. And so his attitude was a reaction to other people's actions. It wasn't like he came in with an agenda or a perspective to begin with, like he had a problem with those people. It was the result of actions, and his judgments were based on that, at least according to his daughter. Of course, we never hear his perspective because he gets killed early in the episode. So all we have to go on as far as his actual perspective is what other people say about him and the few things that we saw of him when he's reacting to the dudes with the radios turned up.
But I just think that generally, though, that would an actual riot would particularly irk G from because you've got that confluence of like the black issue and the fact that he's ESTJ and he wants order, and it's like, look, you're making our community look bad by rioting, and those two things come together, and I think that was part of the episode where they talked about, hey, you don't see the white people rioting.
No, don't do that. Because I'm going to have to carry the TV in it eventually. In it? Yeah.
Right.
It's a convenient way to be able to carry it without having the screen touching stuff.
Okay, so where do you want to put it?
Well, if you can fit it in the closet, that's fine. If you can't, you can put it in your bedroom.
Right.
I can't tell what I'm doing. Was my mic on?
Yeah, it was. I should have muted it. Boy,
Sorry.
but it's just
I
TV.
couldn't tell. I thought I muted it, and then I was like turning it off, and I thought I was turning it on, but I was just trying to save my TV box. So.
Okay. Yeah, so they had that discussion about, but I'm sort of like reading into it from what I imagine from like an ESTG point of view, that it would get pissed off at that.
Yeah, it did sound like you said ESTG. That's like his.
Yes, ESTG.
That's his name, ESTG. Yeah, right. The type. ESTJs would be honored to be called ESTG.
They aspire to be him.
Yeah. He's the guru.
Yeah. And we will do that video, folks. In a few months, we'll be doing, I think, Algier Diallo, Portrait of an ESTJ. Title come up with by Jeff.
Was it really?
Yeah, you came up with that. Portrait.
I don't even remember that.
Yep. Right. And right then, so I'll give this 9 out of 10 for the, because like I said, I usually like it when they have the episodes where they cover the racial issues in a good way, and it's got the nuances in there, and it's not got liberal bias in there, and it's handled well. And I like the drama. I like the stuff with Lewis, and like the little speeches and the little bits of humor from him about his hat, things like that, and the hippity hop music, things like that.
Yeah. I do it like you do, where you're like, I give this part a 10 and this part a whatever, you know. It's like, I'm like, overall, I give it a 10, but the Shepard stuff, I give it about a 5, so that brings the average down. So I'll give it an 8 overall.
Oh.
So you said 9, I said 8, so that's like about 8.5. So
yeah.
Anyway, and I have to actually check, because I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, the next episode is Bones of Contention.
Well, fine. You just say it then.
Okay, sorry. I stepped on you.
No, it's fine. No problem. You know, it's not like I'm one of those people that has to stick to tradition or anything. You know, me saying it every time. So join us next time for the episode Ben already said.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I have had a list of episodes that's been out of order, and Jeff knows the correct order.
Yeah, and that will come up a little bit one more time, but not till later in the season when they started messing with the order. So for a while we're fine with the right order. So yes, Bones of Contention is indeed the next episode.
Right, so, and right, so bye bye, folks.
Bye.